Everyone can see that, yes?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, super, super. Okay, so New York City. So has anyone, okay, Christy, you have been, yes, you have been to New York. Several times, right? Yeah.
Twice, yeah, twice.
Yeah, twice.
Mhm.
And Stas, have you ever been to New York?
No,
Yeah, because you
just central part.
Yeah, right. So you haven't seen a lot of the city. Alexi, you have not been to New York yet, but I know you will. One day you will be here. And Yaroslav, do you have plans on visiting New York?
Yes, sure, it's my dream.
Are you going to, have you been to New York before, Yaroslav?
Not yet.
Not yet.
I haven't, but it's my dream. So yes, I am planning.
Super. Thanks. Well, okay. Well, I can tell you that I know New York City pretty well because I lived and worked in New York for many years, a long time ago. I started working in New York in 1980 and worked there in the center of Manhattan Island. We're going to talk about that. The sort of the big part of New York. I worked here for almost 10 years. So yeah, I know New York pretty well, and I've made many trips back over these years because I have friends and family that live there. So I've spent a lot of time in New York over all these years. And of course, it's an amazing city. There's no other place like it. Certainly not in the United States. And I don't think there are too many cities like it around the world. It's a very unusual city. So we'll spend some time talking about it today. You know, the part that we think of New York is this, you know, the tall buildings and, you know, the water around the city. This is our image of New York. And, you know, it's true. It's a great big city. This part of the city is the most famous, and it's only a part of New York. And we're going to talk about that in just a few minutes. But the thing to remember about New York is that, like Kiev, it's really, you know, lots of people in a small area. You know, Los Angeles, which I'm sure you've heard of, is the exact opposite. Los Angeles covers a huge area. It's enormous. From one end of Los Angeles to the other end of Los Angeles is 100 kilometers. It's huge. New York is much smaller, not so much area, and you've got a lot of people in a very small area. So that the cities feel very, very different. You can see this is a really cool picture, and it shows New York, and it shows all the water around New York. You know, you've got water everywhere. You've got the ocean, you've got the Hudson River here, you've got the East River here, and then there are smaller rivers that feed into these rivers. So there's water everywhere, and so it's made New York, you know, sort of, they don't have much room to grow. So New York just keeps getting bigger and bigger and taller buildings, and there's just more and more in a small area. So, you know, where is New York? Well, it's in the state of New York, which is confusing. Yeah, you know, sometimes you'll hear New York, New York. When people talk about it, they'll say, oh yes, I was in New York, New York. And you're wondering, why are they repeating themselves? Well, because technically it is New York City inside of New York State. So New York City is right down here in this little corner, way down here. But of course, there's the state of New York here. And as I imagine most of you know, the United States, there are 50 states. So New York is just one of 50. And New York is made up, like all states, they're made up of counties. These are called counties. A county, a little bit like oblast, but a little smaller, not quite as large as an oblast. And these counties have their own little government, like the oblast government. And they, every state you go to, you'll travel from county to county. So you look way down here in this picture, and way down here in this little area right next to the water are the counties of Bronx, Manhattan, Queens, Brooklyn, and Staten Island. And those 5 counties are New York City. Aha, that's how it works. Then you have the, oops, let me go back here, sorry. Then there's 2 other counties, Nassau and Suffolk, and they're part of this island that you see called Long Island. So they're not technically part of New York, but you know, they feel like New York. A lot of it feels like the city. And then there's some other areas just north in this county called Westchester that also have a feel like New York, but they're not really part of New York City. And this is where I lived all those years when I was working in New York. I lived up here in Westchester County, and I would take the train into New York every day to work. So I'll show you how that works because I have some pictures about that. So anyway, so now you know about New York State and where New York City is. So let's look at a larger map, and there are those 5 parts of New York, the 5 counties of New York: Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, Staten Island, and the big one that you see the pictures of all the time, Manhattan. Manhattan Island is the one that you know everyone knows about. And then over here across the Hudson River, this is the Hudson River. Over here is, Christy, you know this very well.
It's New Jersey.
It is New Jersey. It is a state. It is another state. But you know, it feels like New York. It's part of this larger New York area. A little bit like Kiev. You know, when you go into Kiev, there are cities around Kiev that are not part of Kiev, but they're sort of part of the same area. And New Jersey is very much like that. This map also shows where the 3 airports are. So you have LaGuardia Airport, you have Newark Liberty Airport in New Jersey, and then the big one, the one that you probably have heard about the most, John F. Kennedy Airport. And this is where most of the international flights come into. Many of them now come into Newark also, but a lot of the flights are into JFK Airport. Hey, Christy, when you fly in, which airport do you come into?
First time it was JFK, and then another quite 2 times it was Newark.
Yeah, Newark. Yeah.
Closer to my aunt's house.
Yeah, a lot easier, obviously, because then you're in there. Yeah, yeah. So these are the 3 airports. I have been in all 3 of them many, many, many times. So I can tell you about the joys of those airports another day. Okay, so here is another map that shows you all of the big highways that connect this area, you know, New Jersey and the different parts of New York City. And you can see, wow, I mean, it's crazy. There are these great big highways that connect all these different ways. And what makes it complicated is the water. You know, you've got water everywhere. And so a lot of these are bridges. You know, you can see the bridges here. And then many others are what we call tunnels. They go under the water, and then come out the other end. So we have many, many, many bridges and tunnels that make up the New York area. And then, of course, getting back to the airport, this is a good picture of you can see how large John F. Kennedy Airport is. It's huge, and it's really big. And this map will show you there are 8 different terminals. So each terminal is about the size of Boryspil. So if you were to take Boryspil, so there's Boryspil, there's Boryspil, there's, you know, it's a big place. They got a lot of big terminals. And it also shows you that this is all connected to the metro system in New York. And the metro in New York is called a subway. We use a different word for it. Subway system. You'll see it right here, New York City subway. And so all of this connects into the terminal at all the terminals at JFK Airport. So it makes it easy to travel by train from anywhere in that area right to the airport and right to your flight. So it does make it easier. Here's another picture of the terminals, and you can see each of these numbers is a gate for the airplanes. So wow, I mean, it's a big airport, right? This is a big place. One of the things that you first see when you come in, if you're traveling and you arrive in America, is you go through the passport control. Normally there's 1,000 people here waiting, but this is what it looks like, and it's becoming more technical, more mechanized now. You scan your passport, you do a fingerprint, you know, on your hand, and then someone will talk to you eventually, and hopefully your visa is okay, and then you are entered into the States. Yeah, it's not much fun. It takes a long time.
It took me 2 hours at the airport to get my going into New York.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
In Chicago, it took about like 40 minutes.
Yeah, it depends on the flights, how busy they are. You know, I've entered Ukraine, as I said, I've entered Ukraine 28 times, and and some of those times have been a long wait.
I mean, I was answering the questions for 2 hours for the police officer, just for the police officer, to get my. Yeah,
just unbelievable. Yeah, yeah, it's not a fun experience, but hopefully you get past this. And then that train map that I showed you, these air trains go right into the terminals. This is Terminal 4, an international terminal. And it's pretty cool that the train comes right into the terminal, and you get on the train and you can take it eventually to another terminal if you're connecting to a different flight, or if you're going into the city, or even going to New Jersey or somewhere else, you can do it all by train, which does make it a lot easier. So let's look at the Kiev Metro map. So we all know this, or at least I think we do. So Alexei, have you taken the metro in Kiev?
Yeah.
Excellent. Does this look familiar to you? I have some of my favorite stops here on the red line, for example. I know this area very well. I also know the green line very well. I take the blue line occasionally, but I know the red and the green pretty well. So we all know that the Kiev Metro has 3 lines: red, green, and blue, right? Okay, now prepare, put on your seatbelt.
New York.
Here is the map for New York City.
Crazy.
Boy, yeah, it's crazy. They have 36 lines. 36. Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. So for example, the one we were just looking at, here's John F. Kennedy Airport, okay, right here. And here's the line that goes into the John F. Kennedy Airport. And then it eventually connects here, and it connects here, and it connects here, and it connects to all these. So, you know, you can go anywhere, but you have to know where you're going, and you have to use the map because it's huge. The metro system in New York is absolutely enormous. So here is just a picture on the right here of just Manhattan. just the area and the downtown part of Manhattan. And you can see all the different lines. They're just everywhere. They all connect. And this is how New Yorkers get around. A lot of them use the metro. And I have a few numbers here for you. So the average number of subway, we call it subway, the average number of subway riders is 5.5 million every day. Every day. Yeah, unbelievable. And the annual, meaning every year, it's 1.7 billion people ride the New York subway system. Again, 36 different lines. And the population of what we call the New York City metropolitan, that means larger city, sort of the city region area, is 19 million people. 19 million. So Kiev is about 3.5 million, I think, approximately.
Yeah, almost 4.
Yeah, almost 4, probably, because it keeps growing. So yeah, you can imagine this is a big place, right? There's a lot of people. And the price in America, the price for each ride is $2.75. So it's a lot of money by Ukrainian standards, but it's actually a low price in America. It's actually a pretty good price. People are not, they feel this is a fair price to pay for this trip. As you can see, you can go anywhere for $2.75. You can go all over the place. So it's pretty good. This is what the subways look like. They look a lot like the metro in Kiev.
Yeah.
And they connect to train stations too, the larger trains that travel above the ground. And there are several large train stations. The largest is called Grand Central Station, right? Central Vauxhall, right? I mean, it's the same idea. So this station is one that I used to go into every day. When I would travel into New York on the train, I walked right through the station every day to go to work. And it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Look at this ceiling at the top. It has the star constellations. We call them the constellations. Christy, what is that word in Ukrainian? You know?
Suziriya.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that word. Yeah. So anyway, it's got the constellations on the ceiling. It's beautiful. You stand in the center of this station and look up and you see it's just amazing. It's really a great station. So anyway, lots of people passing through the station every day. And as I said, so here's a map of the larger area around New York City. And you can see each of these is a train system that comes into New York. So it comes from the state of Connecticut here. It comes from New York here. It comes from New Jersey and Long Island. And all of these come into the train stations. And then you get off of the train, and in many cases, you get onto a subway or onto the metro. And that's how you eventually get to work. So this is happening every day in New York. This is how people get around. People drive their car for sure, but not as many as take the trains and the subways. The subway is the way to get around New York City. Now, one of the icons of New York, the Empire State Building. It's a really tall building, obviously, 102 floors, what we call floors. And it was built in 1931, a long time ago, and built very quickly. They built it in just 2 years. It was built during the economic depression in the United States at that time. There wasn't much work. A lot of businesses were struggling. And to put people to work, it was decided, let's build this enormous building. We want to have the tallest building in the world. We have the ability to do it. Let's do it. And they did. And here it is. All these years later, it's still standing and still being used. Now, we all know the story, or at least I think we do, about the World Trade Center towers. This is what they looked like when they were completed in 1980. And I actually worked in the World Trade Center towers when I was working in New York for about 6 months. I was working right here in this 2 World Trade on the floor number 86, the 86th floor. And I worked here, 6 months. But then later I worked and I went to other areas and then eventually left New York and moved to Seattle. But so I know this area pretty well. And of course, we all know what happened in 2001 during the terrorist attack. You know, we've all seen these pictures. And of course, the buildings eventually collapsed because of these attacks. And they were rebuilt. This new World Trade Center building is finished. This one is still under construction. This is sort of a picture of what it's going to look like when it's done. And then these other trade center buildings in the area are also being built. So eventually, when it's all finished, you'll see these buildings looking like this. And as you can see in this picture, you can see the Empire State Building up here. You know, this is further north. Now, this surprises a lot of people. There are 2,000 bridges and tunnels in New York City. It's incredible how many different things they have to cross when they go under the water or they're going over a certain neighborhood. There are so many bridges and tunnels. When you drive around the city, you really get a feeling for just how many there are. It's really remarkable. And of course, many people know this image of Times Square. This is in Manhattan, in the center of Manhattan, not too far from the Empire State Building that we looked at a moment ago. And, this is the famous place where they have the New Year's celebration. You've probably seen pictures of that or watched it on television. This is a crazy place. Always a lot of people, a lot of advertising, lots of signs, lots of lights. There's a building right here. You can sort of see the top of it. This is the building I worked in when I was working in New York for all those years. And it was right on Times Square. And I worked on the floor number 50. It was the 50th floor of this building. And my office had a great window and it looked right on to Times Square. From my office, I could look down and see all the traffic and all the people. So all those years, even if it was boring at work, I always had something to see. There was always something to look at, looking down at Times Square. So we were just talking earlier before we started this presentation. There are a lot of libraries in New York. The famous one that you may have seen pictures of, the largest one in the center of Manhattan. This is what it looks like inside. But New York City has 92 libraries across those 5 counties or those 5 boroughs. So it's really a great city for libraries. They have a terrific library system there. There's a great place to take a walk on a nice day across one of those bridges. It's an older bridge called the Brooklyn Bridge. And as the name suggests, it connects the borough of Brooklyn to Manhattan, to New York, to the big part of New York City. And on the lower part of this bridge, there are cars and buses and trains. But on this upper level, the second level, it's a walkway for people. It's great. It's not that far. It's a fairly short walk. And you can walk from Brooklyn to Manhattan. And as you can see with the signs, walkers on this side and bicycle riders on this side. So if you ever get to New York and you want to have a great view of the city and a chance just to get this amazing view of the big part of New York City, the Brooklyn Bridge is the super place to walk. Another really famous part of New York City is Central Park. And as the name implies, it's right in the middle of New York, right in the middle of all these tall buildings. You have this really big, amazing park that was designed many, many years ago as the city was growing. And it was such a good idea because it's the place, even if you're living in one of these buildings, you're not far from walking into a quiet, peaceful setting, a place that you can relax, you can sit on the grass and have a picnic, you can sail a boat on the pond here. There's just a lot of things you can do. And way up in this part, there's actually a zoo with animals. The Central Park Zoo is up in this part of the park. So there's a lot to see. And you can see in this picture, this river here, this is the Hudson River that we saw on the map. And here's another bridge called the George Washington Bridge. And then further up the river, way up here, that's where I lived when I was working in New York. And I would take a train every day down and all the way into the city and into Grand Central Station. I spent a lot of time when I was working in New York walking around this park. It's a beautiful place. Now, going back to this picture of the financial district, this is the area when you hear about New York business, you know, banks and big businesses and all of that's happening. The New York Stock Exchange, if you follow finance at all of this is located in this very southern part of Manhattan Island. And this is where all of these tall buildings are. Another great place to walk that has been developed in the last 15 years is called the New York High Line. Line meaning train line, and it's high because it's elevated. And what they did here was they had an old train line that they were not using anymore. So they reconditioned it and built little gardens and grass along this and a very nice walkway. And it goes for a long, long distance. You can take this walk way up north in New York. Have you done this walk before, Christy? Have you done the High Line? Yeah. Next time you go, if you go into the city, it's amazing. It gives you this great view of the city. It's a wonderful place to walk, and it's on the west side of Manhattan. Now, of course, here's Manhattan. Here's the financial district that we saw those pictures of, the tall buildings. But you see these bridges. There's the Brooklyn Bridge that we just looked at, the one that has the great place to walk on it. Here's the Manhattan Bridge, another bridge. And this area right here, this is Brooklyn. This is another part of New York City. And Brooklyn, you know, a lot of people don't know about it, but it's huge. Brooklyn is bigger than Kiev. Just Brooklyn is 4.5 million people. Just in Brooklyn. It's an amazing, very diverse place. I've spent a lot of time there, and I really enjoy my visits to Brooklyn. I have several friends who live there. Brooklyn is also home to a place called Brighton Beach. And some of you may have heard of Brighton Beach. There are a lot of Russian-speaking, Ukrainian-speaking, Eastern Europeans living there. You'll see a lot of shops, you know, apteka. You'll see lots of different, you know, familiar language is being used in Brighton Beach. And yeah, these are all shots from Brighton Beach. So it's an interesting area. There are I think about 400,000 people living there who have Ukrainian ancestors, Ukrainian connections. It's a very, very large Ukrainian diaspora, and it's right there in Brooklyn. Another area just on the other side of Brooklyn, going out onto Long Island, is the beach area called Jones Beach. And it's huge, as you can see, lots of places for cars to park, very nice facilities for, you know, swimming pools and places to change your clothes and places to eat. And then the beach itself, and it's really a very long beach. It goes for several miles in both directions. So this is a popular place in the summer, as you can imagine. And then, of course, we have lots of sports arenas. Oh, boy, we've got a bunch of them in New York. The most famous one is Doss. I imagine you know about Yankee Stadium. It's probably one of the more famous sporting arenas in the United States.
Yep.
And one day, Stas, you'll get to Yankee Stadium, right?
Yeah, I hope so.
Well, this is where we play that crazy sport of American baseball. And then there's another stadium for another team called the New York Mets, and it's called Citi Field. It's named after a bank, Citibank. And it's also located in New York. And then, of course, we have several big football stadiums, American football. And this is one for the New York Giants, and it's actually located in New Jersey. Did you know that, Christy? Did you know it's yeah?
No, I just been in Seton Hall.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
You know this, and we watched the basketball.
Excellent,
Basketball, yeah, but not football.
excellent. Well, it's kind of funny. This stadium is in New Jersey, but the New York Giants football team plays there, so it's unusual. It's in New Jersey, but it's a New York team. And then, of course, if you're a tennis player, they have a really famous tennis tournament every year called the United States Open Tennis Tournament, and it's located also in Queens, New York, and they have this big tennis center, these big stadiums and lots of tennis courts, of course. So if you're a tennis player, this is a pretty famous place. And then, of course, like you said, lots of basketball, Christy. Lots of arenas for basketball. This is the most famous one in New York City called Madison Square Garden. But there's 4 really big basketball arenas in the New York City area. And of course, they also play hockey, ice hockey there. So basketball and hockey. So getting back to New York, looking at this geography. So you've got New York Harbor, this George Washington Bridge again, the Hudson River. And then you've got Ellis Island, which is the place where immigrants used to come into New York many, many years ago, and the Statue of Liberty. So it gives you a feeling for how much water there is around New York. And when you look at this, the best way to see it is to take the Staten Island Ferry. It's a ferry that leaves Lower Manhattan and goes to Staten Island. And it's just a boat that goes back and forth. Param, it's a param, yeah? Is that what it's called, Christy? A param?
I don't know how to say this in Ukrainian.
Yeah,
Yeah, param.
Param, yeah. Param, thank you, yeah, that's it. Anyway, there it is. And it's a great way because it's just a boat that takes people back and forth to Staten Island, but it goes right by the Statue of Liberty. So you get this great view. So you can take pictures and see it without having to actually make a special trip to
Is
see
it
it.
still free or you have to pay for that?
Yeah. It's great. It's a great way to see the Statue of Liberty and to see New York City. You get great pictures from the boat. And of course, finishing, this is my favorite time of the year in New York. During the holidays, when they have the New Year's celebration, they have fireworks out over the water. And in New York City, it's great. It's a great place to see the fireworks. So I hope you get a chance. Alexei and Yaroslav, and of course, Christy, you've been there. Stas, I hope you have a chance. I hope one day you'll have a chance to go visit her because it is pretty special. It's a lot of fun. So next week, or whenever we decide to do this, I thought I would do a presentation about what it's like to travel from Kropotnitsky to the United States. All the different steps, all the different things you need to do when you say, okay, do побачення, America, but first you're going to leave Kropotnitsky, you're going to travel to Kiev, You're going to get on an airplane. You're going to connect probably in Europe somewhere, maybe Amsterdam, maybe Paris, maybe Germany, maybe Istanbul in Turkey, who knows? And then you'll eventually arrive in America, and then you'll probably get on another plane and you'll go somewhere else in America. And then you'll go, all the different steps. So I thought it would be interesting to take you through those steps, to show you what it looks like, to take you through the process of what it's like to travel from my favorite city, Kropivницký, to the United States. So that will be the next time we do this.
Oh, and do you know, Jeff, by any chance, the guy that I'm working with, last time he was traveling from St. Louis, Missouri, back to Uzbekistan.
Yeah.
And he said that Uzbekistan Airlines, they have direct flight from St. Louis, Missouri back to
really?
Like the country. Yeah.
Really?
And they even have satellite internet on the plane.
No kidding.
So he took the plane from St. Louis. It took him about like 18 hours of flight.
Yeah.
But he was working during the whole flight. So he had internet connection. His phone was working. Everything was working. Laptop was connected to the internet. Everything.
Yeah.
That was so convenient. I hope that they will have the same stuff from Ukraine also.
Yeah, the trips that I've made, of course, during the pandemic, in the last year and a half, I haven't traveled internationally. But before then, Stas, like you just described, I had internet the whole way. I was able to do internet on my flights back and forth. And you're right, that changes everything. It makes the flight so much easier, because you can, obviously check messages, you can watch a movie, you can do whatever, but it just makes it so much easier. And, the flight doesn't feel as long.
It really saves time. You are not like losing 1 or 2 days.
Right.
So you are having the trip, you are flying somewhere, but you are still can do the job that you have to do. You are not
Correct.
losing the day of your working time.
Correct. Yeah. It
really also saves time and money.
Absolutely, and it obviously it's becoming more expected. People want to be connected, all the time. And so with several of the airlines, this is the airline that I fly often, the Delta airline.
Delta, yep.
Yeah, and they offer that on all the flights now. So it does make it a lot easier. But anyway, I'll do a presentation on this, and the next time that we talk. And Christy, what do you think? Are you going to do some asking around and see what works best for people?
Yes, sure. I will ask in our Viber group. Maybe we will change the day and maybe change the time for 5, not 4:30.
Okay.
See, it's gonna work. I don't know.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah. Whatever works. I mean, as you know, it's early here in Seattle, in the Seattle area. Yaroslav, I am 10 hours earlier than you. So it is
7 a.m.
Yeah, it is
7:30.
Yeah, it is 7:30 in the morning here in Washington State. But I get up early anyway, so it's this problem. I mean, I'm happy to do it. So yeah.
I think it's not a problem.
Okay, great. Well, do you have any questions? I'm happy to help with anything that if you